this is Lindsay, and welcome to episode 4 of the Off-Camber Podcast, presented by Specialized. This week's guest is Robby Bell. I met Robby about 10 years ago at what was either my first or second WORCS race. And over the course of a couple years of racing off-road, I got to ride and train with Robby, usually about once a week, became really good friends. Always got to hear really cool stories from him from the earlier part of his career down in Baja, and that's kind of where I wanted to kick off with this episode. We ended up talking about how a scrawny kid who was into moto from El Cajon ended up on the big XR 650 down at Baja, ended up winning the 1X plate multiple times, but then how early success kind of went south between being let go when Honda went from a in-house factory team over to a privatized team with Johnny Campbell Racing, losing that spot, having to start his own effort with his father under Precision Concepts Kawasaki, going back down to Baja and trying to get back the 1X plate, and the demons and the crashes that followed from there, along with trying to figure out his U.S. side career to finally winning multiple WORCS titles and now becoming team manager of the effort he started. Robby's a pretty funny guy, a lot of good jabs in here. I think it's a really fun episode. I will warn, we record this in the back of his shop at Precision Concepts, so there's a little bit of air nozzle hissing that pops up maybe about 4 times. Turn down the volume so it shouldn't intrude, but do be aware it'll happen for a few seconds over the course of a little over an hour podcast a handful of times. Also, I wanted to thank the 3 brands that allow me to make this podcast happen and bring you different guests every week. First up, we are presented by Specialized. The all-new Turbo Levo gives riders the power to ride more trails. The Big S supports a lot of people in our industry, a lot of great equipment, pretty much any bike you can think of. Check them out, specialized.com. Also, Chaparral Motorsports is actually the title sponsor of Robby's team. Chaparral Motorsports, Precision Concepts Kawasaki, shapmoto.com. Chaparral has been around for over 30 years in this industry, whether it's dirt bikes, quads, side-by-side gear, part, accessories, you name it, they have it. If you want to shop online with them at shapmoto.com, punch in the code ML512 at checkout to save yourself a few bucks on your next purchase. Last up is Fox Racing. They dropped a couple sets of gear a few weeks ago for spring. It's their airline gear, super high-end vented, so if it's warming up in your area, check it out. It's really good stuff. They also have a brand new full-face mountain bike helmet out called the Rampage Pro Carbon. If you're interested, jump on foxracing.com and check out some of the technology in that helmet. I'll give you a little hint. Some of it's coming to moto here pretty soon. So let's jump into our episode with Robby Bell. Hey, this is Lindsay, and welcome to another episode of the Off-Camber Podcast, presented by Specialized. My guest this week is Robby Bell, and I feel bad. This is the second time we're doing this. Easiest way I can describe it is I'm not the best with technology at times, so this is go number 2. Like I said, we've been friends now for, I think, around 10 years. I met you first time I did pretty sure it was first or second time I did a WORCS race. I met you through Ryan Abatoy at the time, and I mean, you've got quite the storied past in off-road, but as some, there's some guys that go after off-road as a career, and there's some that definitely don't start there. You were a kid from El Cajon that wanted to do amateur motocross and get to professional motocross. Things didn't quite work out, and you ended up at Baja at a pretty young age. Let's just start there. How the heck did you end up there after trying to chase the moto dream?
It's kind of an interesting path. Like you said, I grew up riding desert just with my dad, and then around 16 years old, I decided I wanted to make a go of it in motocross and kind of chase the amateur scene for a few years. Did Loretta's a couple times, a couple of the bigger amateur nationals, but I had a couple big injuries, and it just wasn't, I could tell I wasn't going to get the support basically to really make a go of it, because I think it's still the same way now, at least pretty close to it, is like if you don't get a ride and get some really good support or have parents that can just basically pay for a nearly factory bike, it's tough to compete. And so my dad at the time was doing suspension for the American Honda off-road team, and after I kind of got back from some injuries in 2004, I went to a Big 6 Grand Prix at the old LACR back when they had the road, the drag races and stuff back at that old location, and just wanted to try something kind of fresh, and ended up from the amateur line passing everybody except I think Mark Tilley in the race from the amateur line, and passed all the experts except him. And so all of a sudden Johnny Campbell and Bruce Ogilvie kind of like, maybe this kid's got a little bit of an eye for off-road. And I mean, to be fair, like LACR isn't the most off-road worthy, especially that LACR wasn't the most off-road-ish.
It's like a moto track with a tiny little through the bush loop and then a drag strip you run up, back and down.
Yeah, so maybe not the best tryout for an off-road, but it was enough for them to say, hey, well, let's just see what he's got. And I went on the end of up 4, I went on a peninsula run, mileage run for Baja on an XR 650. I was like 5'9", and maybe 130 pounds, with gear. So that was a big learning experience with a huge bike and such a different type of riding. But after that, they gave me a shot, basically said, if you want to pursue this, we can give you a couple CR 450s and some XR 650s. You can race Baja and Best in the Desert. And my grand scheme, or my secret agenda was, all right, well, I'll use this basically to get some support, and I'll have a couple CR 450s, and I can I'll race the off-road stuff, then I'll do some motocross on the side and see if I have any potential there. But honestly, aside from some adversity and trials and tribulations in the beginning, I kind of fell in love with the off-road side of the sport.
So there's a couple aspects of like what to chase there for, I think, storyline, but the easiest one is coming from being like a really young kind of scrawny kid at the time. You go from riding CR 125, CR 252 strokes. We're just getting into the 4-stroke era for motocross bikes, and then you jump on the couch, the 650. Like I said, I mean, you do the LACR. Imagine that was either on a 250 or 450 or something. But what was the first test on the 650 like, and did it really surprise you? Where was the first time you basically rode one?
The first time I rode one, I'm sure it was in Bell Mountain. I don't have a clear memory of it, but I remember going on the mileage run and just how heavy the bike was, how comfortable it was in a straight line. But it definitely was some effort to turn. That was one of my first impressions of it. And then, I had a steep learning curve on it, though, because I straight into my first Best in Desert race was Parker in 2005, and I was 20 years old, I think, teaming with Kendall Norman, and he crashed like right off the start, 20 miles into it, and so I had to race the rest of the Parker by myself, which wasn't a huge deal, but again, I was like so new to this. It was a big eye-opener for me, and I crashed on the last lap, and that was one of those learning experiences. Like, I came into I was coming down a hill, and it was like a 4th gear straightaway and into a right-hand corner, and came in way too hot. Like, I was starting to get pretty comfy and maybe not like cocky, but so like, okay, I know how to ride this bike all of a sudden. And I just came into a corner a little bit too hot, and I was thinking, all right, there's a little bit of a lip on the outside of this road, so maybe I'll just lean it in, kind of like pitch it sideways, hit that lip and turn. And there was so much weight. I hit the lip, and it literally ejected me off into the desert. So that was my first experience. My second one was San Felipe, when I bent the front disc in a whoop section and ejected into some cactus. So, and then third, I'm trying to think of what my third race was, but those two are like right off the bat. Like, those are my first two racing experiences with the XR 650, and I real quickly started to think, what am I doing with my life right now? But then, fortunately, like throughout the year, I started to kind of get used to it, started to get used to the bike, build my body a little bit, and started to show enough promise, because by August of 2005, I remember Bruce Ogilvie coming to me and saying, you kind of need to either show that you can learn and show that you can have the potential to race, or this is going to be your only year on the team. And up until that point, like, I know my dad was just whatever he could do to support my racing habit. So it was the first time I was like, ooh, like, I need to actually do something, or I could lose what I have. And so that was kind of a big turning point. And I remember in August of the Nevada 1000, I finally showed some potential. And then later that year in the Baja 1000, I actually was leading physically. I don't know if overall on time, but I was more or less matching Steve Hengeveldt's times, who at the time, like, he was the guy off the start in Baja. And so that was kind of a breakthrough moment for me, and then just kind of took off from there.
From a standpoint of actually riding 650, what is it good at in Baja conditions? What's the positives and the negatives compared to like the modern day 450s that most of you guys take down there?
I mean, the obvious positives are it's indestructible. Well, not indestructible. I mean, no bike is, but it's about as indestructible as you can get. It's super reliable and is really good in a straight line, really comfortable. Where the downfall or the shortcomings are like big whoops. It's actually really good, almost like a trophy truck in big whoops, unless you get out of shape, because it's so much harder to bring it back because you have so much weight and inertia. But it's actually surprisingly good in whoops, as long as you can keep it straight and you're brave enough to keep the throttle on. You can probably go faster on a 650 in a straight line, even over the gnarliest terrain, than on a 450. But if you get out of shape, it's really scary. And and obviously, like, the cornering, how nimble it is, how quickly it gets up to speed, because like the top speed, obviously it has, but getting up to speed, I think the 450s kind of stretch away from that. And I mean, honestly, if there was a team that was supported on a 650 for like a Peninsula Baja run these days, I think it would still be pretty competitive, just because like the length of the race, less chances having something, malfunction or less maintenance required. But at the same time, it just seems like such a dinosaur. It's crazy to think that bike, that platform was almost 20 years old now.
So once you're on the team, like I said, after your first year, you were near the cut of actually being booted off. You get your first experience on the 650s. I mean, where was your mentality at the time? Because like you said, the whole back of the mind is I'm going to eventually switch to motocross. Being that you're basically being told that you need to do better off-road or you're getting cut from this team, did you really have to, per se, put the motocross dreams on hold? And did you mentally focus more on making off-road a career at that point? Or were you still trying to balance it maybe a little too much?
My memory of it is that once I really applied myself in off-road and kind of made the mental decision that okay, I need to make this work, otherwise I'm not going to have anything. And I kind of allowed myself to really, like I said, wrap my head around it and get into it. Then I don't remember having any more drive to go back to moto. For sure, over the next few years, I raced some national motocross. I always did Mammoth. And I loved riding and training in motocross, but I definitely lost that drive to be like, oh no, I'm just doing this just to support my motocross habit. It was pretty quick, honestly, that I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And I think Baja was a lot of that because, I mean, being so young and growing up more in the confines of motocross, and then all of a sudden seeing this huge adventure. And I remember Bruce Ogilvie looking at, kind of explaining what Baja is about. And one of the quote-unquote obstacles is okay, say you're coming up to a gate and you see a rancher there and he has a gun and he has it pointed at you. You have a decision to make. Do you think he's going to shoot you? Do you just ride by him? Or do you find another way around? That's just another obstacle. You got to figure out what you're going to do because it's not like you're just stopping, that's kind of how he explained it. So it just made it such a big adventure. And so that's kind of what drew me to it.
Did you ever run into that obstacle when you were actually in Baja?
I
never
actually. I mean, with guns, yes, but never pointed at me. And then, but I actually remember hallucinating in 2006 that some of the bushes looked like guys with guns pointing at me.
You hallucinated that the bushes were guys with guns.
Yeah, I mean, it was twilight, and I'd been on the bike for, I don't know, at this point, 11 hours without planning to be on the bike that long. So that was a whole nother story.
Well, I guess if anybody's driven too late in the night, they've probably had one of those similar moments where they think every car is going to hit them when you're really half tired and you're driving. So, I mean, maybe that's about the closest I can get thinking a bush is a rancher. But how was the first couple experiences of Baja? What were the results like? What was the experience like your first couple trips?
The first one was San Felipe 250 in 2005 on the 650. And that was maybe 15 miles into my ride, maybe not even that, maybe 10, is when I bent the front disc on the, guys that race Baja know the power line that parallels one of the highways, and it's just nasty whoops. And I bent the front disc, just had it land like lottery hit on a rock. And so it locked up the front end and literally ejected me in the cactus. And I remember vividly having these two cactus balls just embedded in my neck, but then bouncing as I get back on the bike. And it also kind of showed how green I was to having to on the fly do some mechanical work because the front disc was bent, obviously. So when it would come into the caliper, it wouldn't move. And so my big fix was to, I think I just unscrewed the caliper and let it dangle. And so looking back, it's maybe a safer way to do that was to either take the disc off or take the front brake system off. But anyway, the good news is I got it to the next pit. And we, it wasn't the greatest experience, but it definitely, I mean, if there ever was a welcome to Baja, that was it for me. And then it was months trying to get cactus needles out of my back. And I remember them actually growing out of my skin, and 6 months later being able to pull them out. It was kind of a trip, just literally landing back first in a bed of cactus. But that was my first introduction to cholla, which anybody who's raced Baja knows about those too, or in Arizona. But yeah, then 2005, so Baja 500 was the next race, and that was pretty smooth, nothing stellar, but I didn't have any main issues. And then the Baja 1000 was when I was kind of coming to grips with the bike, feeling better speed-wise, was out front physically, and I think Steve Henschfeld might have been a couple bikes in between us, he was a couple bikes back, so I was actually pulling away at that point. And I remember getting that news and just feeling oh, this is it. This is my breakout ride. And then all of a sudden, I remember coming down kind of a little left-hand drop down, and then there was a little ditch. and some locals, and I don't remember seeing any people around, but some locals had dug the ditch deeper and then packed the dirt on the backside. And so the second I hit that, like, it just ejected me. And I actually remember like flying through the air, the bike landing on me. And my first thought was like, how am I going to get this bike off? Because I remember being on my back, almost turtled with the bike on my legs. So I'm stuck. And my first thought was like, there's nobody around. How am I getting up? And then all of a sudden, like 20 people jump out of their booby traps in the bushes and stuff and like come pick the bike up, like get me back on the bike, help me like bump start it. It's like, where did these people come from? And that seems to be a theme throughout my Baja career as well. But so that was my first year in a nutshell. It was definitely coming to grips with the bike, learning the adventures of Baja, and then finally showing some potential, but running into the infamous booby traps that Baja was known for in the mid-2000s.
So basically for you, though, with Honda, you weren't initially, I mean, you're hired on to be developed to eventually be a Baja winner. But at the time, Honda's always kind of geared it with a two-team approach. So at the time, you were technically B team, correct? A was it Steve and Johnny at most races, and then it was you and Kendall kind of learning together, basically, the ropes per se? Yeah,
that was kind of the grand scheme, I guess, in Honda's mind was... I mean, Bruce was definitely, he was the team manager. He was actually like off-road R&D head for Honda, but he used some of that budget to fund Honda's off-road effort, which was at that time Steve and Johnny, and then Bruce was kind of a visionary because he saw that the confines of Baja was closing in a little bit. Like Nevada wasn't what it once was, as far as, it was just getting tougher with land use issues. So he saw that, like, at the time, like Hare and Hounds, WORCS, kind of closed course competition was kind of where the sport was headed. So he was looking at me and Kendall as far as filling that void. If he could groom us into excelling at Baja, because that was Honda's main goal. But then also, as we got into 2006 and 7, he looked at Kendall being a Hare and Hound guy, myself being more of a WORCS Grand Prix guy. And that was kind of like the overarching goal or vision that he had.
So I was saying, when did kind of the whole shift with that program is going from the 650s to the 450s, you guys using that platform to race across multiple disciplines and series. What was that like after spending, per se, your first time on the team? Like, okay, I got to get my head wrapped around riding this big couch, and then all of a sudden shifts back to the 450. And if correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe as the B team, you guys were actually the first ones to race it, correct? The A team per se stayed on the 650, and you guys gave the 450 its first true Baja outing?
Yeah, in 2006 was when, like you said, the 450X was introduced as a long-term replacement to the 650, and Kendall and I were kind of the test dummies or the guinea pigs for that. And for me, honestly, it was a bit of a relief because I didn't particularly enjoy the 650. Looking back now with more of a mature, like, racer's mind, I'm like, okay, I can see where it was a good bike, and I appreciate it now for what it was. But at the time, I was like, man, get me off of this thing. Like, I was happy to go to a lighter bike that I could maybe not muscle around yet, but at least, feel like I could wrap my head around a little bit more. And then I don't remember us having a lot of growing pains as far as the bike development, but it was cool to kind of feel, again, looking back, that we were a big part of the development of the 450X as a Baja, weapon and like a longer distance off-road weapon. And so that was kind of cool to be a part of. But that was the scheme of it as far as Johnny and Steve. Actually, I think it was Mikey Childress and Steve Hengeveld were the quote-unquote A team racing the 1X bike on the 650. And then myself and Kendall were the B team on the 450X. And we actually ended up winning the 250 and the 500 that year. And then going into the Baja 1000, this gets into the whole story of hallucinating. So Kendall and I had won the 250 and the 500, and kind of like the 250 was a little bit of controversy because the 1X team got docked for using some lines. And so we kind of won that not by default, like we were there obviously, but we won it
after the fact.
After the fact, exactly. And the 500 was the first time the 450X had actually like entered and legitimately won a long off-road race. And so that was a big accomplishment. So going into the 1000, I remember Johnny Campbell jumped on to our team on the 450X, and Quinn Cody jumped on the 1X team, or they drafted him, I guess I should say, to ride with Steve and Mikey. And I could see kind of the whole vision of this, of what it was built into be, as like myself, Kendall, and Johnny, we had won the 250 and the 500 on the 450X, kind of the underdogs a little bit, the B team, quote unquote, on an unproven bike. And then Johnny had his streak of, I think it was 10 straight Baja 1000 victories. And so this was going to go for number 11, which would have been a record. Maybe it still is when he got it. But anyway, it was going to be a record, and this huge story. And so I kind of had that pressure and that weight on my shoulders on the start line at the Baja 1000 in 2006. And I just kind of rode over my head a little bit. I remember there was one guy left in front of me going off the start within the first 40 miles. I'd passed a few guys. There was one guy left in front of me, and he was just a roadblock, just creating so much dust. I remember thinking, man, I got to get by this guy. And just taking too many chances, riding too close in his dust. And I remember for a split second, there was all of a sudden daylight. And I was like, I just got the lead. I passed him. What happened? And as I'm thinking, I just passed him, I smacked the booby trap that he had hit and crashed on. And that's why I got that clear vision, because he had crashed, and literally I smacked the same thing, wadded up. And kind of the same story as the previous year. All of a sudden, all these people are around me. They get me back on the bike. They get me going. And I'm riding for maybe a mile and a half. And I'm like, man, this course does not seem familiar. Like, I pre-run this thing so many times, but it doesn't seem familiar. And all of a sudden, Mikey Childress on the 1X bike comes around a corner, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, why is Mikey coming backwards on the course? And how did he pass me? Like, what is happening? And then, light bulb, all of a sudden light flashes, or my eyes light up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going backwards. So obviously I had gotten back on the bike, everybody had gotten me going in the wrong direction. So I turn around, I fought kind of ride side by side with Mikey for a little bit. And then he sees that I'm pretty good. So then he takes off, and that was 40 miles into a 330 mile section. So it was 6.5 hours later. I didn't have a water pack because I lost that. I didn't have my tool pack. I lost that. Had to change a flat tire during the race. I don't know, a mile 200, 250 or something like that. So I finally get off the bike at El Crucero, and I'm like, I am done with the Baja 1000. That was my stint, my responsibility. Obviously, it went horribly, horribly wrong, but I'm done. Kendall got on the bike, maybe 50, 70 miles into his section. We start hearing reports that 6X was our number. 6X has crashed. And I just remember my first thought is, please tell me he's okay. I am not getting back on that bike. I am not getting back on that bike. And then we hear reports, 6X can't continue. He's coming out to the highway. You need to meet him at this kilometer mile. I'm like, oh gosh. So not only was I still dingy, I hadn't really eaten anything all day because I was just done. And then I have to get back on the bike. Hadn't pre-run this section at all. And it's a bunch of lake bed section, miles next to the ocean. And so I'm literally and this is before we had GPSs. So it's not like I could have, a handlebar mounted GPS to just look at and follow the arrow. I'm hoping that it's marked well enough that I can get the bike down to Johnny, who's probably 250 miles down the peninsula. So I remember, and I can't believe I almost forgot this part, the night was falling. So I was on the bike in the daylight, and I was okay through there for maybe a couple hours, and then darkness fell. And that was the scariest part, because I was going across salt flats in darkness, and the markings were not that great, because obviously you got to pre-run. So score was we'll mark it well enough, but so I remember going through sections where I hadn't seen an arrow in probably 5-8 miles, just wondering, am I going the right way? I'm following the most burned in track I can follow. And then there'd be a marker, or there'd be a little flash of ribbon. I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. But that was where I was so dingy, no fuel in my body. It's probably 8-9 o'clock at night, and I got up at 4 that morning, and I was just so dingy that I remember actually hallucinating and kind of freaking out on the dirt bike, thinking that these bushes on the sides of the trail were dudes in army overalls or covers or whatever, crouched in the bushes with AKs pointed at me. And so that's it was pretty crazy. Looking back, it was a heck of a story and a crazy experience that honestly I'm just glad I got the bike to Johnny, and once I did, that I was done. I think I slept the whole next day. I was so done.
What ended up coming of the 1000 that year for overall results with all that went on?
I know the 1X team, they ended up winning the race, but myself, we still got second bike, which is amazing for all that we went through. I guess it kind of showed you the disparity, between the classes at the time. And I know we won the 1X plate on the B team, and then after that, that was all I remember. I think the 1X bike won overall against the trucks as well, and we were down the order, but we were second bike basically after all that drama.
Hey, I just want to take a quick break to thank the 3 brands that make this podcast happen. We are presented by Specialized. The all-new Turbo Levo gives riders the power to ride more trails. If you're into e-bikes, Specialized has been behind them for quite a few years now, and they have quite the range to choose from. If you've ever thought about trying one, look on their website. They got plenty of demo events going on. I think you'd be really, really surprised at what the bikes are capable of and what riding one is like. As they like to say in terminology, it's you, but only faster. Also, Chaparral Motorsports. Chaparral Motorsports is the title sponsor of the Chaparral Precision Concepts Kawasaki team that Robby Bell, that we're chatting with, manages. They've also been around for more than 30 years, whether it's dirt bikes, quads, side-by-sides, gear, part, accessories. They've got it all. Huge dealership, online present. Check them out at chatmoto.com. Punch in the code ML512 at checkout to save yourself a few dollars. We've also got Fox Racing on board. Fox just dropped airline gear. They got 3 different colorways, 1 LE and 2 standards. If it's warming up in your area, check them out. It's really a high-end gear from them, pretty much second to only about their Flex Air lineup. And also, if you're into mountain biking, check out the new Rampage Pro Carbon helmet. It's an all-new high-end helmet from them. It's got a lot of cool technology, and I think you'll be seeing some of that coming over to Moto here pretty soon. So we're going to jump back into our conversation with Robby Bell. So once you guys actually had once you were part of the 1X winning team for the overall for the year in Baja between 250, 500,000, where did that place you for the next couple years, basically with the team, with who you were riding with, and kind of what did Baja look like for you for the next I believe it was 2 seasons you were still with the team, 07, 08?
Yeah, 07 was American Honda again, and then 08 was the launch of JCR Honda with Johnny's privately owned team. But so 07 was actually... It was interesting because I remember going into that season that I remember Mikey Childress was no longer with Honda. He wasn't on the team anymore. Steve Hengeveld still was. And it was kind of a question of like, well, the San Felipe 250 has traditionally just been a 2-man team. So how was it going to work? Was it going to be the 3 of us? Because I remember thinking that like they weren't going to break with tradition. So how was that going to work? And then, it was really unfortunate for Steve, but he actually went to the first WORCS race that year in 07 and broke his humerus, broke his arm basically, if I remember right. And so then all of a sudden he was hurt for that time when the San Felipe 250 was occurring, which I think ended up actually becoming the Baja 250 because San Felipe boycotted the race or didn't want Score for some reason that year. So Score actually ended up basing the 250 out of Ensenada, which was kind of cool, but just a different experience. So basically it was one team at that point. It was me and Kendall, and then Steve. It just worked out perfectly that Steve came on board for the Baja 500. So it was a 3-man team for the 500, which worked out perfect. And then I remember the 1000 that year, it was like the dream team. It was myself, Kendall, Steve Hengeveld, and Johnny Campbell, 4-man team. And that's when KTM first started coming into Baja a little bit with their 690.
690 in the trellis frame.
Yep. Yeah, with David Pearson and that whole team. And man, they had a Dakar guy, Cyril Dupree maybe? One of those guys. Yeah, and so I was actually given the responsibility of starting that Baja 1000 in 2007. And same thing, we had won the 250, won the 500, so we were undefeated. And going into the 1000, this was like the dream team. And I remember feeling the pressure, but looking at it differently because in my mind I was like, all right, in 2005 I was leading the Baja 1000, wadded up, hit a booby trap, didn't get a perfect bike to my partner. 2006, kind of the same thing. I was trying to pass for the lead, wadded the bike up, hit a booby trap, didn't get a perfect bike to my partner. So that year in 2007, I was like, no matter what, all I'm doing is not crashing. And it doesn't matter to me as much if I'm the fastest guy down the peninsula to get the bike to my partner, but I'm getting him a perfect bike. And so, that's what happened. I remember afterwards, Bruce was overhead in the helicopter and he said, dude, your lines were like perfect. It's like you rode a textbook race. And not that I needed that praise, but it was just really cool that my internal plan totally worked out. I gave Kendall a perfect bike and he went on, had a perfect ride. Steve had a perfect ride and Johnny had a perfect ride, and we ended up winning that overall against all the trucks, all the other bikes. And I just remember like looking back fondly of like that was probably one of my favorite races as far as it's just everything was like clockwork. Like if you drew up a plan, that's how it worked. And it's so rare that happens, especially in a peninsula run for the Baja 1000.
How nice was it to actually have a true 4-man team? Because that would have been your first 1,000 running a 4-man team, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was perfect because that was the 40th anniversary for Baja 1000. So they ran a little bit longer race. I want to say it was like 12 or 1,300 miles. So it was a little bit longer. So it made it really nice having a 4-man team because I did, I think, the first 200 miles and then got a break when Kendall got on and then rode another 150 or so. And then that was it. So I got like the perfect experience of, it was like a long stint, but not too long to where it's like, okay, dude, I need to get off the bike. But yeah, it was really nice having a 4-man team.
What was it like actually having, because, I mean, prior to that, Factory Honda was pretty much the only factory entity that you would ever, your team was the only really factory entry when you guys lined up. You're up against some good support teams. But with KTM coming in, they did take it weird trying to race the 690 at first. Were they ever really competitive, or, were you guys ever really, per se, worried at that event about them? If, other than the fact, I'm sure in your mind, you guys like, okay, if we do everything to the plan, we're good. But were they ever competitive enough with that bike to be a problem per se? Or
I don't remember that they were, and more, I think beyond that, or what I held on to more was Bruce's framework. As far as he never really worried about what the other teams did. I remember his pre-race talk usually consisted of a couple points, and the main ones that stuck with me are, we have the 2 best bikes when there were 2 teams. And I think for 07 it was different. We have the best bike. We have the 4 best riders. We have the best plan that we can. And so all we need to do is go out and execute. And that was kind of the gist of it. So it wasn't really like we were nervous about them. I remember not really feeling like they were going to be a big threat at the 250 or the 500, just because those were more of sprint races. At the 1,000, I remember giving a little more thought to them just because it was a big bike and it was a peninsula run, and with their top speed, would that play a role? But when we executed it the way we did, I remember we just pulled away the whole run, and KTM ended up having some issues too and fell back. But to my recollection is that we just pulled time at every pit stop, and it was pretty much perfect.
So you go into 08, and there's, I think, a couple things to talk about that. Like you said, it's the first year that it actually becomes a private effort, and I was kind of curious how that came about with Johnny actually owning his team that Honda ended up supporting, on why the Factory Honda effort went away. Number 2, that's your last year with Factory Honda, and I think while we've been talking about Baja success, there's a third thing waiting, kind of a story that we haven't talked about around the same time, is Robby Bell Super Fader and WORCS. We've been talking about a lot of positive, but I'm sure that has a lot to do with the end of this 08 story. So I'll let you wrap out how 08 went all the way through and why it ended up where, you basically ended up not on the team anymore.
Yeah. So, 2008, like you said, it went privately owned for, and again, I think this was Bruce's vision. If he saw that to be able to compete the way that he felt Johnny needed to compete, and it was also kind of perfect timing because Johnny was at the end of his racing career and was looking for the next step. And so I don't know the inner workings. Like, obviously Johnny would know that way better than me, but my knowledge of it was basically that Bruce was like, I think this is the right time to kind of like give Johnny the reins. And then Bruce was also beginning to struggle with a little bit of health issues at the time, so he was looking at it as a way to give Johnny the reins on something, and give him the opportunity to take it further than he could take it anymore. And so then I remember having another pretty perfect year in Baja with Kendall, and then I think Johnny again in the Baja 1000. I think it was a 3-man team with Johnny in the 1000. We swept the series, won the 1X plate again. But all the while, in my American-based racing career with Honda, I was starting in 06, I was racing WORCS. So my 2 main focus were WORCS and Baja. And in Baja, I was having built into great success. But in WORCS, the first year showed glimpses of, having potential in it. But man, I could not get past like an hour and 15 minutes. And I would just throw the anchor out. My legs would be cramping so hard that I remember after races, literally laying in the back of the RV, just laying on my back, all my limbs like stretched as far as they could, so I couldn't cramp up, and still just cramping laying still because I was just so dehydrated, deteriorated physically. And then in 2007, I can honestly not tell you what the breakthrough was, but I started having some success. I got a few podiums at like Havasu. It was 119 degrees. I remember that vividly. Havasu, 2-hour race. And I mean, anybody in the mid 2000s that raced Havasu knew that like it's rough now for sure, but it was just such a different kind of rough back then. I think because there wasn't as much water on the course, so it was like sharp edges. And it was just brutal. And there were like, I just remember the rollers through the corners where you never really sat down. And somehow I got a third place behind Ryan Hughes and Kirk Caselli, and I was third. And like, I don't know how that happened to this day, genuinely. And then, but I got a couple more podiums throughout that year. Like actually, I mean, pretty legitimately earned a third place that year. Aside from, I think, Bobby Garrison, Ricky Dietrich, Nathan Woods, like they had some bike issues throughout the year, maybe some health issues if I remember right. But I mean, you know, I was there and earned some solid finishes. And then 2008, I kind of went back to the super fader. I like an hour and 20 minutes, maybe an hour and a half. I'd throw the anchor out, and my good friend Ryan Abatoy, we still joke about it to this day of how many times Ryan would come up from the second line that started behind us on the Pro 2s, and like hour and a half in, he'd just come catching me and be like, oh, there's old super fader Bell. And then I'd either be upside down in the enduro cross section because I just was cramped up and couldn't get through it, or had faded so hard that he just, you know, kind of cruised right by me from the second line. But so as much success as I was having.
Do you know how much I love that WORCS races don't really have enduro cross sections very much anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool, but like, as long as it's not taken to a level that the guys can't ride it, you know?
Well, at least then it was the early days of enduro cross. It was like a couple logs of tires. Now, if you look at what like Colton and Cody have to do, if they put any of that on a WORCS course, that wouldn't be good.
No, not so much. It would be like racing for, you know, 99% of a lap, and then who can survive the enduro cross?
Yeah, who can push their bike through it?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, getting back to it, in 2008, yeah, I kind of went back to having issues, just being average. Maybe I finished 11th in the standings. So as much success as I was having in Baja, I was struggling in domestically. And so I remember going to the end of that season, and my personal goals had shifted to where, like, all right, I kind of had the success as much success as I could have hoped for in Baja. And I wanted to race American based. I wanted to race domestically and continue there. And so Johnny was kind of the other mind, where my value was in Baja, and if I didn't want to race Baja, he really didn't have anything for me, which I totally understand from a business perspective. He had Timmy Wiegand, who was, you know, pretty solid in WORCS, like a podium guy, and then I think he was kind of grooming Colton Udall at that time. So I was at a point where it's like, all right, I don't want to race Baja. And I remember meeting at this little Mexican restaurant in Paris, and the talk with Johnny of, he basically like kind of business proposal it out of like, if you want to race, I have a spot for you for Baja only. If you don't want to race Baja, then I really can't do anything. And it was really a matter of fact, like, all right, I don't want to race Baja then. And so we split ways, and that had rippling effects kind of with my dad's business with Precision Concepts. He kind of split ways as well with Honda. And then I remember not too long after that, I was on the fence because the way it's structured, and I think it still is to this day, is that the earned number is the rider's number, not the team's number like NASCAR. So the 1X plate was my number in my name, because Honda, when I first started, named me as rider of record over Kendall, which is kind of a bummer it was that way, because Kendall was every bit that number, obviously. But it was in my name. And so in my mind, after I split with Honda, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to give the number to Kendall. But then I remember that Johnny went, without consulting me, went to score and basically tried to rip the number, and without consulting me. And so that hurt my ego a little bit, or yeah, just kind of hurt me. And I was like, so all of a sudden, I shouldn't say it hurt my ego, but it hurt to where my ego all of a sudden stepped up and puffed out his chest, and it's like, no, that's how you're going to do it? No, you can't have that number.
I'm 1X.
Exactly. I'm 1X. That's my number. So I held on to 1X, and then that gets into another story of how we came back on the Kawasaki, and it led to more opportunities that furthered my career, basically.
But there's still a stepping stone. Me and you talked about this, but you thought you were going to go race Supercross for a couple months.
So that's the side shoot, like, wild story. That's after I walked out of that meeting with Johnny, I'm like, all right, I've got some 450s, and I still I had raced a few nationals and gotten top 20, like almost, I think 16th was the best I'd placed in a national, which is respectable. And I was like, I want to try Supercross. Like, I feel like my dream never got fulfilled, or I never gave it a chance. So I'm going to go race some Supercross. So I went in on Adam Chatfield's track at the time with Ryan Villapoto and Chatfield and I think another guy, I can't remember. My dad bought some A-Kit stuff, and it was out in Beaumont.
Probably Jake Weimer.
It might have been.
I think Jake was training with RV at the time.
And so that was my big plan. All right, I got a couple 450s. I got some A-Kit suspension. I'm going to race Supercross. And after like a month of training Supercross, like I was decent. I could hit some of the rhythm sections. I could kind of get through the whoops. But I realized I was losing like 4 to 6 seconds a lap to Villapoto when he was just cruising. And then just realizing how much money it was going to take to actually, like, legitimately chase that dream. I was already starting to have second thoughts. And then Kawasaki, I can't remember if they approached my dad or my dad approached them. I was like, hey, we want to race WORCS. We want to kind of start our own team, and can you support us? And Kawasaki came through with a lot of budget, and it was perfect timing because they wanted to kind of use us as a grooming platform for kind of their quote-unquote B team. And so it was myself, Jamie Lanza, and Taylor Robert in 2009 riding Kawasaki's and WORCS.
Yeah, because that was a little bit different layout. That time, Kawi actually had their own WORCS team. They had a Monster Energy Factory Kawasaki that had hosted multiple riders over there. That's who Dietrich had been riding for. Quite a few guys in out of that. So it was a little bit of a different situation, but part of that also comes up with you guys were kind of B team for them WORCS, able to groom some guys up, but then the whole going back to Baja with Kawi came about, and how, like, you told me that conversation came up kind of uniquely because you weren't going to end up racing Baja that year, were you?
No, I had no plans to race Baja, but I'd been struggling throughout 2009. Again, just the super fader days. And so I was at a point where, like, man, I almost just needed to taste some success or get back to something that I remembered fondly with success. And so then Bruce Penhall at the time approached myself and my dad, and he had also approached Destry Abbott and had this vision of, like, let's go back down to Baja on a Kawasaki. I still had the number 1X, which I didn't have any plans of doing anything with. I mean, Kendall was going to win it at the end of the year, and it would be his number. So I was like, that'll play itself out. I felt bad for sure. I shouldn't say I still do, but at the time for sure, I felt bad that I kept the number from Kendall. But it did, in a selfish light, it did allow for the opportunity to go back down on the Kawasaki, because Bruce had contacts with, I think, Wahoo's Fish Tacos and Monster. And so the pitch was like, hey, we got Kawasaki, we got the 1X plate, we've got, Robby Bell, Destry Abbott, Steve Hengeveld as well. So we've got like 3 really bad dudes on dirt bikes. We've got, bringing Kawasaki back down for the first time since 1996, I want to say. So it brought a lot of support into the team. And that was kind of how that all came about. So it was Bruce Penhall's baby, basically, that he put together.
So it's kind of funny. That's the actual layout of the team. So like I said, Penhall's, you had his sons Connor and Ryan on the team. But then from there, you guys brought Steve out, who I guess I have to ask maybe a short version why he wasn't with Honda anymore. And then you had Destry on the team. And even though Destry has all of his success in Hare and Hounds, he had never been able to add Baja to really his resume at that time anyways.
Yeah, and I kind of feel, where to start? I know with Steve, it was similar with me to where Johnny and Steve, their paths just didn't line up anymore, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but suffice it to say, like, with going into 2008, myself and Kendall were the A squad, and so he was kind of in the same boat with Steve of, like, I don't really have a place for you. And but I kind of feel bad for Destry, because that's kind of the one feather in his cap as far as the races that he wanted, I think, to have success in, as far as the Baja 1000. And I think both years I teamed with him, I ended up crashing and in my opinion, costing our shot at it. But yeah, so basically, Destry wanted some success in Baja. It was kind of the one thing he hadn't really experienced. And Steve and myself both kind of wanted, I think a little bit of that ego of, like, yeah, let's go back down and beat Honda. Not so much win the race as much as beat Honda. And that's how it kind of came together. And then Connor and Ryan were, 2 young kids that showed some talent and promise. And so it was a 5-man team for 2009. And kind of like the way 2007 was, or 07 went, like you couldn't have drawn, but like for me personally, you couldn't have drawn up how it was going to be executed much better. We were pulling time at every pit, and then had, I want to say like a 12-minute lead, and until. So basically, like my second section was some of the nastiest terrain in Baja. It was from Old Puertecitos all the way up to Mike's cutoff. And so it was like over 100 miles of just whoops and rocks and just really nasty, physically taxing terrain. Really easy to make a mistake and have an issue. And I probably rode it as beautifully as I could have ridden it, and pulled like, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 minutes on the Honda bike. And then literally I was maybe a half a mile from the highway. So like a half mile more of dirt, and then a speed section of maybe 8 miles down the highway. And that was it. I was done for the Baja 1000. Here you go, Destry, take the bike. We're going to win it. And that half mile from the highway, I let my guard down. I, in my mind, said, I did it. I got through all that nasty stuff. And the second I did that, there was just this little rock or something hidden in a long shadow as the sun was starting to set. And I was sitting flat on the seat, and it just kicked me sideways, high-sided over the bike, wadded the bike up. The bars were literally, like the right side was like a speedway bar. It was like bent down. And so I got back up on the bike, got the bike to Destry, and we still had a lead at that point. And we had a decision to make. Do we change the bars? Do we just send it? Destry's like, I'm sending it. So he did the best he could. Connor did the best he could. Steve, the same thing. We ended up being the first team to beat Honda physically since 1996, but they were close enough to us that they beat us on adjusted time and won the Baja 1000. So we ended up losing it by like less than 2 minutes, I want to say. And that was like, I mean, each one of these stories kind of builds on itself. That was an experience that caused or created so many demons for me, which is why I kept going back down to Baja over the coming years, and like facing adversity, crashing, getting injured, but kept going back because I felt like I had so much unfinished business because that experience had created so many demons for me.
Yeah. So I was going to say the next couple of years of Baja gets really interesting as, like I said, you guys are going back down with Kawasaki Honda team. You're trying to face down demons and just going through adversity, and then more teams start getting involved. That's when KTM gets involved, and I kind of look at it as when you guys were there just alone as factory Honda. Not to say you guys didn't have to be on it, but you guys, as long as you put together the right program, you guys didn't have to ride over your head to win Baja. You going down there with Kawasaki is the first time you guys really gave Honda a run for their money, where everybody would actually have to start pushing themselves. And then Kurt and KTM and their group comes down and the level just gets raised. Would you say at that time, did Baja just become too much? Everybody was it went from everybody being able to ride at a comfortable pace to it just got to the point everybody was trying to push the limits too much? Absolutely.
I mean, I remember when I first joined Honda, and Johnny and then TJ at the time explained it to me that you never race, like they never really raced above 85%, because you always got to keep that out. If you're coming around a corner and there's a cow or a car or something, you got to have an exit plan, because otherwise, I mean, you could die, literally. Those are the consequences. So you never raced to 100%. And I think the year we went down in 09, we had just a fantastic bike. Like, that's one of my favorite Baja bikes ever. That 2009 KX450 was so good. But also, I think we caught them by surprise. Like, the Honda team was doing what they always do, riding 85, 90%, and we were raised it a little bit, riding that 95% and flirting with it. And I think that's kind of what got me into trouble, is I was so mentally taxed at that point that I dropped my focus before I should have. But I think that kind of caught them by surprise. And then when KTM came down, that's when it went bananas. Like, we were all going as close to, and at times over 100%. And that's when I remember San Felipe 250 in 2012. I want to say that I shared a plane flight back to the States with Quinn Cody, because we both crashed, and I shared a hospital room in the States with Timmy Wiegand. So one guy from each team had crashed, crashed bad enough to be, to have to go back to the States for hospitalization. And that was just foreshadowing what was to come over the next, year and a half, year and 2/3, which ultimately culminated in the passing of Kurt. And that's, another big, just huge milestone just in the sport, basically, of such a loss.
At the time when it actually all started to happen, were you able to in the moment realize that it was becoming too much, or just as a racer yourself, it's just like, okay, we got to keep getting back up, keep doing it again? In the moment of that year and a half coming up between everybody pushing the limit so much, and then Kurt's passing, do you feel like everybody kind of realized at the time it was getting too gnarly, or did it straight up take Kurt's pass realize like this has gone way too far, basically?
Yeah, for me, I can only speak to my, at least I can speak best to my personal experience, and it took Kurt's passing to be like, wow, this has gotten way out of hand. I remember consciously thinking we're going too fast, but then I'd get on that bike and be like, I got to go that fast. Because just the racer would take over in that competitive edge, and because that's how you can make up time. Like if somebody else was playing it safe and going 90% and keeping that little buffer zone to have that out or have that safety net, you can make up that time by going that 95, 98% and just taking that chance around that next blind rise of like, I'm going to keep it on a little bit longer, or around that next corner, I'm not going to take the safe route. I'm going to cut that inside lane where there could be a car or a cow or something, and then not leave that out. And so I think like that, and that's what I mean by raising it up that 5-10%, is taking those little risks where if you're on a closed course, you can take those risks pretty, not safely, but you can take them a little more calculated. But in Baja, the consequences are just so bad and so grand and great. And we all learned that the hard way, obviously. And I remember when after 2013 Baja 1000, and I had actually crashed 7 miles into my ride, because that year they started at night, and David Pearson started for us, and then he got the bike to me, and we had just ran out of gas like right before the pit. So David finally got the bike to me, and we had lost 20-30 minutes, and Taylor Robert was actually on the team that year. So again, we were like, oh, we got a good team. We got David, I want to say we had Steve again, we had Taylor and myself. It was like, dude, this is a good team. And so yet again, I felt that pressure to just send it. Like, I got to make up all this time. And I got on the bike, and I remember the bike feeling like a little harsh and like not fully broken in yet, but I'm like, I got to do this. I got to keep the throttle on so I can try to make up this time, because I had, just all the pressure and the weight of just how good the other teams were, how good my other riders were, how much time we had lost, and we got to get back in the race. Everybody's behind us. We got to go. And 7 miles into my ride, I hit like a stump, like almost like a knuckle sticking up just in the middle of the course. And I still don't remember seeing it. Like I don't remember seeing it, but my GoPro, you can kind of hear the thump, and it just shot me off the course right into it, like a couple trees, and the trees just stopped the bike, and I just end over end, and I don't remember anything after that. I remember seeing the GoPro and what happened after that, but I don't remember it. Yeah, so it was a horrible personal experience for me, and we ended up, because I couldn't get back on the ride for my second stint, so we were way back, and just personally, it wasn't a good race, and we're sitting maybe rice and beans, papas and beer, somewhere after the race, and waiting for our bike to come in, and we started hearing reports that the KTM was down, and it was Kurt, and then it started turning into Kurt was hurt really bad, and then it started turning into Kurt passed away. Kurt's, he's gone. And I remember just not believing it. Like, no, it's Captain America. Like, it can't happen to him. It's crazy. Like, going through all the doubt, and then as it was getting confirmed, and just learning what happened. And I don't want to touch on it too much, but I think just the hardest part about it is just knowing that he was alone for so long after he had crashed, and that's just the hardest part to wrap my head around. Like, I can't imagine that. And just, like, there were a lot of people that were a lot closer and knew him a lot better than me. And so the amount that it hurt me to lose him when he was just, a friend of mine, I can't imagine what his best friends and his family especially went through in those moments. It's just, it was so painful just for the whole community.
Yeah, I think, off-road community in general is, I want to say a bit tighter than moto by, a decent chunk. And I think the motorcycle industry as a whole, or off-road side, if somebody gets hurt, the fundraisers we put together, the support of people is really strong. But in off-road specifically, just from the way everybody treated each other, like I think too, it may have been, I can't remember if it was 3 or 6 months prior to that Baja. It was, I went riding with you, Abatoy, Ivan, Kurt, and I can't remember. There was, I think, I'm trying to think who rode with I Valentine Prieto. Rode sand track, but then another day, just the ranch right behind my house where we always come out. Like, we were up there for the whole day, because I remember watching poor Ivan struggle in this rock section really bad. But Kurt, I can't remember what Kurt's just come off. He's just... It was just kind of funny, the interaction between the whole group, and looking back on that day. Like, you don't see stuff like that in moto.
I remember he was, like, jokingly pissed at me just because there was a lot of poison oak out there. And first of all, he's like, dude, you take me to this sketchy place. It's, like, super dry and hard pack. And I knew the course, so I was comfortable getting Sendy on the course. Yeah. And he's like, I think he did 2 laps. And I was like, no, I'm not riding that. And and then all the poison oak he got afterwards. He's like, are you trying to kill me? Like, what's going on? So, but that's, I mean, like you said, that's just how the off-road community interacted. Of just, we're all out for a trail ride and having fun. It's not so much competition all the time. Like, I remember so many times Kurt came to me and was like, tried to help me with my issues of fading, and like, I've got some things for you to try. Like, I want to see you get better and do better. And so, like, I doubt anyway, you see like Muscan going to Webb and say, I want to see you doing better. Try this. So that's just kind of I think it speaks, one, to the camaraderie in the off-road community, how tight-knit it is, and then two, and I don't want to, maybe Muscan does do that. I don't want to say he doesn't, but it just kind of speaks to Kurt's character too, of like, he was at the pinnacle of his career, and he was focused on helping, like, myself, I know Ryan Abitoy, other racers achieve what they could achieve. So, it was just, he was a great guy, and he just such a good guy, and such a huge loss for our sport. It sent just a ripple effect. You don't even know how big the reach was. It's crazy.
So with that, just touching a little bit on what Kurt was at the time, I just did one of these with Andrew Shore, and we were talking a lot, about his current rally experiences, and that's saying that Kurt at that time had just started to really break into that. His first run at Dakar was absolutely fantastic, and he was starting to make some big waves in that area. Being your experience in Baja and Des Racing, did trying that ever pop into your mind, or did ever a conversation with anybody about getting the opportunity to try any rally stuff, or nah?
I think when later in my career, when I would have been more open to it and better at it, I didn't have the opportunities. Earlier in my career, when I maybe could have had the opportunities, I didn't want to at all. I just wanted to race Grand Prix and moto. I was happy.
So kind of what did I guess kind of where we'll pretty much leave off on Baja is kind of the after Kurt era, basically. At what point did Baja finally become enough for you, and you stepped away for it, and what really was the aftershake of that all happening? What would you notice happened to that over the next 12 months?
The obvious is that KTM pulled out, and just, I think their off-road effort in general changed over the next, few years even. And then for me personally, I remember talking to Katie, my wife. I don't think she was down there, but on the phone at the very least, I'm like, I'm done with Baja. Like, that's it. Especially after hearing about Kurt and learning about Kurt, I was like, that's it. I'm done with Baja. Like, I may have some demons, but it's just not worth it. Like, I couldn't see myself going back down. But then 2014, and we had, my dad supported the THR team with Ricky Brabeck, Max Eddy, and Steve Hengeveld. And so they had won the 250 and the 500, I think they had. And there was another race. I think they got second. It was when Score kind of branched out and did an American-based race. But basically, like, they had a good shot at winning the 1X. And it would have been, Ricky's first Baja 1000 victory, Max's, obviously it would have, like, basically the way that all came about. And, like, they had a legitimate shot at winning 1X. And then, obviously, I could add value to the team, but I was still in the mindset of, like, I don't want to go back down. But then it finally clicked of, like, I need to, at the very least, go back down to Baja and experience it on my own terms once. Like, I felt like every race since 2011, even 2009, really, I had gone down there, tried to go too fast, with all this pressure, all this weight of being the guy in Baja and trying to beat everybody and just wad up, hurt myself, etc. So the way I looked at 2014 was like, all right, I want to go down there one more time to just ride the race, just get the bike A to B, have a good experience in Baja, and have that be the end of it, because Baja had given me so much. I didn't want my memory of it to be crash, Kurt, So that's kind of what I did. And I went back in 2014 and teamed with, like I said, Steve, Ricky, and Max, and probably rode the slowest I've ever ridden in Baja, which was still good enough to get my partners a perfect bike, and they picked up the slack, rode fantastically, and that year was another one that was just meant to be. Like our motor should have probably blown up about 200 miles before the finish, but somehow it held together, and we ended up getting the win, and Ricky got the 1X plate, and that was it. Like, we won the 1,000, Ricky won the 1X plate, and if I never race a Baja race again, like, I'm so beyond happy with how my career, like just the trajectory and all the relationships, opportunities that I had and made in, the Baja had given me. And so yeah, that chapter is definitely closed for me.
So, but like I said, when that chapter closed, it definitely changes your U.S. racing a little bit, because back to Super Fader. At the time, like, you guys first go to Cowie's, you're racing WORCS, you're racing Grand Prix style racing in the U.S. on a team that basically you and your dad have put together. It still wasn't going that well the first couple of years, but with the Baja support, it's always, like I said, there's kind of this opportunity to keep it going. And as the Baja chapter starts to close, it means, basically U.S. career has to step up, or heck, maybe your own dad would fire you. I don't know.
I still don't think he ever would. Yeah, he probably supported my habit too long. But
basically, now that you're team manager, and we'll get to that a little bit, looking back on yourself, which year would you have fired yourself? What year?
Legitimately, probably after 2009. Like, yeah, it was pretty bad. But yeah, 2010, 2011 kind of struggled. 2012 was a shifting point in my domestic career, my work career, basically. And I think I honestly owe some of that to Ryan Hughes. And not like I remember going to a couple riding lessons with him, and I agree with a lot of what he says about riding technique and stuff like that, but just one like comment that he probably doesn't even remember making. And we were at Paris, and I was just getting dressed and before a riding lesson, and he looks at me as I'm getting my shirt off, and he just like kind of pokes my stomach, and he's like, "Yeah, you've got a gluten intolerance." And whether legitimately like he knew that I had one, or I just had the symptoms of like a bloated stomach, and he's like, "Yeah, you need to cut that out, basically. That'll help you physically." And that was the lightning rod that was like, all of a sudden I started doing some research on, okay, how can I actually last and do better physically, basically build my body better, and prepare my body better, because I had gone through so many different diets.
You're a fad diet guy.
Yeah, I was a fad diet guy. If somebody told me, "Hey, this will work," I will try it, and I will jump into the deep end head first and just hope there's something underneath to catch me. But yeah, I tried like 30 vitamins a day. I tried magnets under my bed, which I actually still sleep on, and they're really nice. I tried.
I did not expect that one.
Yeah, I tried the Michael Phelps diet of trying to eat 10,000 calories a day.
Oh, I remember that one. I remember. I can't remember which race we were at, but I remember. I just remember it would seem like, because WORCS races are almost once a month, it seemed like every 3 races I would listen to you telling Ryan, Misi, the couple guys, like about what you're doing for a diet right now. And it wasn't, you wouldn't just kind of move from like one diet to a similar one with changes. You would go from the opposite end, like I'm doing the Phelps diet, I'm eating all this a day, to I'm starving myself and drinking shakes every day, and I only eat once a day.
And then vegan.
And then vegan.
Yeah, I tried vegan for like 2 weeks. At least veganism was just a quick experiment. That didn't last that long.
Did you try caveman? Did you go straight from vegan to red meat only?
Yeah, exactly, right. But basically, I tried all these fad diets, and Ryan Abitoy, bless his heart, did the Michael Phelps diet with me, and we still joke about it. They're like, "Man, it is hard." Like, you would think, "Oh, it's so nice. You can eat whatever you want, as much as you want." It is hard to eat that much. But anyway, so that didn't work.
How many calories was that day?
I know we could legitimately get over 6,000 a day, but that was literally waking up, eating pancakes and waffles and eggs, and then going to Carl's Jr. and legit, I was not eating the best quality food to get those calories, but all I thought that was important was the calories.
I can picture the pancakes right now, because I remember being at a race that Ryan woke up and made a bunch of pancakes that morning, and then got super dehydrated from eating all the pancakes during the race.
Yeah, but then. Yeah, so it was pancakes and all that in the morning, and then Carl's Jr. and In-N-Out for lunch, and then a sandwich, and then tour of Italy at Olive Garden for dinner, because I remember looking at, this is like 1,500 calories, just a tour of Italy. I can mow that down. But yeah, it was a lot of work. But anyway, so then after that, after trying all of those kind of fad diets and just thinking there was going to be one miracle switch, when I went gluten-free, it actually produced some results. And in 2012, I started to legitimately run with the top guys and getting some podiums against Taylor Robert and Justin Soule, Bobby Garrison at the time, who were, like a lot of like the Mike Browns, obviously. Kurt had moved at that time to Herrenhounds. Mike Brown was at the end of his WORCS career. Ricky Dietrich was trying to do the whole motocross experiment. So there wasn't as much depth to WORCS in 2012. But the one thing that like Taylor was still there, and he was always one of the mainstays. Is like no matter who was there, he could win at any time. So at the very least, like when I kind of getting off on a tangent, when I look back at my WORCS career, there was at times a shred of doubt of like when I had success, is it just because I'm the only one left standing? And there is probably a bit of truth to that, but at the very least I can hang my hat on, at least from a personal level, that when Taylor did come back at races, that I had his speed. And unfortunately I never actually beat him like straight up. I passed him a few times and had the speed to beat him and had actual game plan that worked out, except then I'd like crash or do something silly. But it at least showed me that like I can sleep at night saying like, no, I was there or thereabouts. You
got to be in to finish it, because I think like Taylor's track record, I was thinking about the last race, I think the only WORCS title he won is the only one he's
2012
finished. I think that's the only one he finished, because he starts the season early. I still remember a funny one with him was Speed World, the year they was on Valle Yamaha.
That would have been 09, I think.
09 or 10? No, 10, because it was the new style bike. So it was 10. He went out and won that race by a decent margin over
with a blown out knee.
That's what I think he did it. I remember he gets up on the podium and goes, yeah, I blew my knee on like the second lap, and he whomped Kurt, those guys at that race, and that's pretty much the story of his, though. He's definitely fast. So like you said, of guys to be at a WORCS race, to run with, compete with, Taylor is definitely on the high end of gnarly speed. So to be able to even be at that level of speed, but still be able to complete a title, like I said, I know people can definitely, it could probably hurt people like, oh, well, this guy didn't finish. Well, take Taylor's track record. It's pretty hard to even finish the season doing that end of it, to be right on the cusp of that and be able to actually put together for three WORCS championships. 3 number one plates.
Yeah, I ended up winning in 2013. That was my first year winning it. And then 2014, at the start of the year, I was actually training some little kids, and a kid had crashed on the REM track at Glen Helen on top of a tabletop, and so I was just pulled up behind him to like kind of block him and try to help him get his bike up, because he couldn't get his bike up on his own. And then a guy from behind it was blind, and looking back, like I was an idiot for just parking on top of a blind tabletop, but all I could think about was getting to the kid. And a guy came over the jump and landed literally just right behind my leg and blew my knee, not apart because I didn't have to have any surgery or anything, but man, it ruined my knee. And so for like 3 months, I think I was dealing with a knee injury in 2014, and was still able to get second. And Gary Sutherland, kind of the same thing, like he legitimately was the best guy that year and won the championship. But then I remember 2015 was like, I was so focused and so fired up to win the championship again, and that was like every race I entered up through like June. I think every race I entered except for maybe one I won. And that was when I started getting, I think, a little carried away. Like my diet was teed up. I was doing paleo and like gluten-free for the most part, a little bit of paleo. Like it was before keto became a big thing. And then so I was feeling just super good physically. I got into CrossFit. Like my body was the best it had ever been. And I was working out twice a day, riding like 3 or 4 days a week, like probably asking a little too much of my body, at least not doing it smartly anyway. And so, but it was paying off. Like I was winning pretty much everything I was entering at the time. And then I go to, in 2015 in July, I go to just a SoCal MC, just motocross race at Glen Helen. And I was entered 3 classes, and it was kind of the same thing, like I'm going to push myself. And I just worked out on Saturday, and then hung with some friends Saturday night and stayed up, a little late, like nothing crazy, but till like 10:30, 11, just, having fun. And then Sunday, it was like 90 something degrees at that track at Glen Helen, and I was like, God, I'm gonna enter 3 races, and the pro race was like 20 minutes plus 2 laps plus 2 other 10-minute races, and 2 of them were back to back. So after the first round of motos, I finished the 20 plus 2 and then went straight back to the starting line for the next moto. And I'm obviously tired, and my bike was hot too. And so coming around, I think the second or third lap, my bike starts to kind of like blip or cut out. So I remember thinking, all right, I think my bike's just too hot. I need to go back to the pits. So in that moment, like I kind of disengaged my mind from where I was on the track. And when I remember like coming back to of like, okay, I'm just going to like cruise over the finish line, jump it, and then literally roll right off the track and go back to the truck.
But it was a wall.
But it was the wall jump right before the finish line. So I seat bounced the wall jump and didn't hit it hard enough to do the Blake Baggett and jump on top of the finish line table. I literally faced the finish line table from, 30 feet in the air. And my chin came down not on the bar pad, but right next to it where the steel mounts. And so it just blew my jaw apart. Not my jaw apart. It blew out, I think, like 4 teeth on impact. I had to have 5 more taken out later. And then, and that was kind of the first wake-up call of like, all right, I'm asking too much of my body. And that was kind of the start of just a string of like little injuries and some bigger injuries mixed throughout that kind of led to my retirement from racing full time. Because like at that point, I was of the mindset, I can race until I'm 40. Dude, this is coming so easy. Like I'm a beast right now. I can do this forever. And then that happened and that knocked me down to earth. And I think it needed to, because I was getting a little too big of an ego, and that definitely humbled me. And it's taught me so much since. Like I'm glad it's happened, because I'm on the road to getting, like permanent teeth again. And I've learned just so much just from like accepting myself and not crawling into a shell when I am, kind of embarrassed or, I guess embarrassed of just a little bit of my personal appearance. So it's taught me so much and I don't regret it. But yeah, up until that point, I was like, I could do this forever. This is coming too easy. And then that happened. So I was able to actually still win that championship and then win the championship again in 2016. But through some adversity, late in 2016, I broke my collarbone 2 weeks before my daughter was born. And that was like, so then that whole 2017, I think for the first year of McKenna's life, I wasn't healthy, like 100% healthy. And so in 2017, I was finally like, all right, like middle of 2017, I need to get healthy. And then literally I was healthy for like 2 weeks. And going into 29 Palms Big 6, I was riding back up to like, all right, this is working again. Like I'm feeling good again. And then last lap, maybe a quarter mile from the finish line, kind of like Baja again, I let myself go like relax a little too much, because I put in a big effort, come from like 7th place, passed into the lead, was on my way to winning it, and then just let myself relax a little too much into this left-hander, high-sided, hit my head and was knocked out, and ended up hurting my ribs and my back really bad. And so that was like the final coffin, because that was like, I literally just got healthy for the first time since my daughter was born, and then that happened, and it was a pretty bad back injury for a while, and I was like, that's it, I'm done. And then to add insult, I finally was starting to feel a little bit better towards the end of 2017, and to where I was like, all right, I can just, enter a couple races and just kind of go out the way I want to. And then on a practice day at Glen Helen, my motor locks up midair and hurt my back all over again. So I'm like, now I'm done. And that was kind of the final coffin. Like I was able to race the 2017 WORCS finale in Adelanto and did like half the laps, and then call it a career on that, which was cool. And then fortunately last year I was able to just kind of make a guest appearance at Mesquite, and actually ended up getting a top 5, like just rolled off the starting line behind everybody and just rode around, like, started kind of getting into the race a little bit, but just wanting to experience like a WORCS race again, healthy in the pro class, and ended up getting a top 5, which was like really, I don't know, it was just kind of cool, just surprising, but honestly, it was just kind of a cool way to close out like my WORCS career as well. Kind of like Baja. Like I didn't come back and blow everybody's doors off for my last ride. I came back and just had a good, fun ride and enjoyed it the way I wanted to.
What was it like racing coming up to your daughter's birth? Because I've had this conversation with a couple pro riders that have had a child during the career, and I can't remember who was I've had this conversation with, and they kind of mentioned that they almost felt like pretty close to their child's birth, they almost shouldn't have been racing because they were pretty distracted at the time. Did you feel that at all, or were you like, when you look back at the time racing before, were you still fully focused on racing, or did it change your perspective much during the time? Did you get those kind of worries about your health and your safety with the kid coming and stuff?
I don't think I did. I think when I crashed, because when I broke my collarbone 2 weeks before McKenna was born, I was actually just getting back into like training hard again, because Dalton Shirey in 2016 was like, he was on fire. And he was catching me for the WORCS championship. So I was like, I need to put food on the table. I need to win this championship and get that bonus, honestly, because we had a house. I mean, we had grown up life. And then not only that, and then we were having a kid, which I had heard is not cheap. So I'm like, I need to buckle down and win this championship. So I didn't personally have that so much because I felt the need anyway to go out and win.
It was more motivation.
Mm-hmm. It was more motivation of like, I need to provide, and this is the best way I know how to provide, so I got to go out there and earn it.
The other one is kind of what you were talking about. I mean, with your mouth, we're 4 years down the road. I know you're finally getting close to the point of having your final surgeries done. And I think when people think of a debilitating motor injury, the first thing that pops up, of course, is being in a wheelchair. People think of really horrible knee injuries and you can barely walk afterwards. Back injuries. I don't think a lot of people think about what you can basically do to your mouth. And I actually had a really dumb one over the weekend. I overshot something, Lance. I was basically, feet blew off and I smashed my face into the bar mat and almost bit into my tongue a little bit. And I remember riding back to pick going, I was picturing what had happened. I'm like, man, it can be so much worse, because I never had thought about that style of injury until it happened to you. Mm-hmm. And kind of same thing, do you ever think anything like, it definitely has to change your perspective on what we consider a bad injury or, a lasting effect per se?
It's interesting because, one, it's a hockey injury. Like, those guys are missing, all sorts of teeth.
Watch a hockey thing. There's a couple teeth missing every time they grin.
Yeah, exactly. So on the one side, it's like, it's not unheard of in sport, but it's, it's kind of more stereotyped that that's a hockey injury. And just because we have the full face mask and everything. And as injuries go, when you say debilitating, it was actually not one of my worst injuries from a physical standpoint, because I was able to actually race, I think, I was able to ride 2 weeks later and race, I think, 3 or 4 weeks afterwards in Washington, because I had to for the championship. So I was able to ride, and it wasn't, obviously it was just cruising for points.
I kind of meant more like, because just from a comment you made, or like more debilitating mentally, because I think
that's what I was getting to. Where it was debilitating, or where it took the most toll, is emotionally. Because anybody who knew me before I lost my teeth, I loved to smile, and it was one of my favorite features about myself, I guess you could say, was my smile, and I realize that now. And I think that's going back to what I was saying earlier, is that in a way, I'm almost happy it happened, because it's taught me to try to be as much of myself as possible without one of my favorite features. And so, that's, you talk about learning to function at a deficit, I guess you could say. That's definitely something it's taught me, and just being more secure. I don't know what I'm going to be like when I have permanent teeth again, but definitely you're not going to be able to wipe a smile off my face. I could be pissed off and I'm going to be smiling still, just showing those things off.
So closing the chapter on racing now to what you're up to, like I said, the team that you always rode for, at least from 2009 on, the Kawasaki effort, was you and your father's team, Precision Concepts Racing. During more of the final years of your racing, I know you put more effort into how the team was presented, how you went about sponsorship, and eventually tried to transfer it over into a program where you could step back and actually run it as an effort and try to build it. At what point did you realize that was going to be your move to try to build this into that, and how was that transition period?
I think going all the way back, almost not to go too far back, but going back to 2012, like when the economy, the waves of that were hitting the off-road market, and there wasn't a lot of support to go around, and I basically started creating value out of like race reports, GoPros, and having a package to sell that was more than what other riders were doing. And so that helped the transition into becoming more of a team manager, as I was learning marketing, and I was learning value generation and things like that while I was still racing. So that helped the transition a little bit. For sure, the first year and a half, as I really stepped away from racing full time, it was kind of tough, because I was like, man, I could be out there. I could still be running with those guys. You have that little whisper of ego in the back of your head. But now, especially this year, like, it's amazing how much my mindset has changed to where I have zero ego left when it comes to riding a dirt bike. Like, out of the WORCS race last week in a canyon, and some guys were joking with me when I was out there just for a sportsman race, and they're like, oh, you're gonna lap us and blah blah blah, and I'm like, dude, I'm just out here to have fun. Like, I don't have any expectations on my own, like how fast I'm gonna go. I could be the slowest guy out here and just have a good time. So it's actually amazing, and I think it's been a blessing how quickly that's come, because I know other guys that that the ego is a little stronger, and it can pull you back. And especially, I mean, to be fair too, like guys are starting to make money again in the off-road side of it, so that can pull you back too. If like, you know, it's like, oh, it pulled me back. Like in 2014, I was close to retiring too, because there wasn't a lot of support, but it was the best way I knew how to make money. And so it was like, oh, wait, I could maybe start doing this, but I could go and win a WORCS race and make $5,000. It's hard to turn that down. So it keeps pulling you back a little bit. So I've been fortunate in that, like, my mentality has shifted so much, and I've really jumped full force into just helping create a platform to help other riders showcase their talents and kind of give them the opportunity that I was given, more through my dad. Yeah, but in like 2016, I'd say that's when it really started to kind of transition more into making a team product instead of just myself as a racer. And from there, it's really blossomed. And I mean, I'm so grateful for sponsors like Chaparral and Kawasaki to jump on board and really make this kind of vision and dream come to fruition. And I feel like we have a lot of momentum behind us, and some great racers on the team. And I mean, hopefully, economy and market willing, that we can create kind of a dynasty with it. It'd be great.
Yeah, because this year alone, you're at you're past the 10-year anniversary now for this being an effort. Hopefully, keep another 10 years or more under, like I said, under more the management side than the racer side. Yeah,
I'd love it. Like, I mean, it just, for me personally, I'm learning something new every day, and learning just communication with sponsors, R&D. I mean, just taking it seriously from a standpoint of we're trying to create value for everybody that's supporting us, because they're helping us do that. And so it's just helping me just in life skills in general. And I wish everybody who is racing to be able to start building those skills as well, because it goes beyond just riding a dirt bike.
Last one for you. How hard is it from a management standpoint to deal with coming into this year? You guys had a great opportunity with Kawasaki stepping up their support of the team. Through that, you ended up with another Bell on the team. Zach Bell is now one of your riders, albeit not related. And at the time, you had I would say a person who was more of a newcomer to your guys' organization, Blaine Thompson, but you had somebody that was a long-term member that had been a long-time teammate and friend of yours, Justin Seeds. You had to let Justin go from the team, but like I said, you guys had, it wasn't just a rider of yours for a year or two between running your guys' suspension, being part of your program. I mean, first time I met you, I think Seeds was running your guys' suspension side, so I know you guys have supported him. Yeah, you guys have supported him for like 9-10 years. So how difficult a decision was that to pull yourself, I guess, out of the pure friendship side and doing what was needed for the sake of the team? And how was that conversation?
That conversation was tougher in my mind beforehand than it actually was in person with him. And I mean, that taught me something too, is that you can go down the worst case scenario, and maybe it's good to be prepared for that, but don't assume that it's going to happen in your worst case scenario that you play out in your mind. Because it was definitely tough at times, because I mean, Justin's like family to me, such a good friend, and there were maybe times I was a little not too easy with him, but it was it was hard to like really demand something out of him, because it's like, well, I don't want to make him feel bad, but all the same, it's like, it's also a business that I was trying to create with the team. And I think we both had realized that our relationship as far as a manager racer had run its course. And honestly, I think it's been better. It was instantly better for our friendship, because there wasn't kind of this weird tension in the background of like, oh, let's go have a good time, but you kind of sucked last weekend at the race. And to be fair, I mean, what's crazy too is just what shows how mental it is that once we had that conversation, Justin had some of the best rides he ever had riding for me or for the team or for my dad. And it just shows how mental it can be, is that it's tough when it was almost like he was trying to perform for like family, for like, if your dad's putting pressure on you to perform, you're not going to do as well as if you're doing it for just yourself or your coach.
I guess kind of it almost comes full circle to your experience with Ogilvy a little bit was kind of the same thing. You'd always rode under your dad's support, and the first time per se an employer looks at you and goes, hey, you kind of need to step up or you're gonna get cut. In Justin's case, did, but as you said, he actually stepped up and rode the last bit of his segment with you really well, and then this year he started out really good. Now that it's a little more of an eye-awakening moment or something, so it kind of comes full circle per se.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I've heard this a few times from podcasts that I listen to that I think we grow out of being uncomfortable and we change out of experiencing pain. And having something taken away from you is definitely a source of pain, and it can make you think about what you really want. And so I think as much of a bummer as it was for Justin that he wasn't on our team any longer, I think it was actually probably one of the best things for him. I think he feels the same way because he's got a good gig going now. I'm super happy for him, and it's all been positive.
Oh, cool. I think we'll cap it off there. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. It was great fun.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode of the Off-Camber Podcast presented by Specialized, make sure you hit subscribe. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, pretty much all the normal spots. You can also find these podcasts with video on youtube.com at youtube.com/Michael Lindsay, or you can punch in 512testing.com. It'll take you to the same spot. You can subscribe to YouTube channel. I've got a bunch of content on there with bike tests, project bikes, some tech info. Trying to upload there anywhere from 3 to 6 times a week. So take a look there and enjoy.